Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We had this conversation a couple of days ago, and we felt the need to bring it up again because it still hasn't received the attention it deserves from the international media, from the national media, and also perhaps from government. We're going to try and put this into perspective for you to sort of show you what we're talking about. We spent some time trying to source visuals of the Similipal National Park and Tiger Reserve, which is spread across 2,750 square kilometers. It has a tiger population, it has an elephant population, and it really is a gorgeous space. The reserve is home to, a lot of animals and plants that are specific to this location. These are photographs my colleague Ira has managed to source from photographers. 94 species of orchids, 25 species of mammals, 304 species of birds, 60 species of reptiles, 21 species of amphibians, fish, and butterflies. The government declared it a biosphere reserve in 1994. UNESCO added it as a national park to its list of biosphere reserves in 2009. Those are the visuals that you're looking at on your screen. It basically means that there is natural life in the trees, in the soil, and in the water that really deserves to be protected. Now, every year there are wildfires that take place in this beautiful land, but this year has been exceptionally bad. The fire, we understand, has been burning for more than 10 days. And a major forest fire has also broken out now in the adjoining Kuladiha Sanctuary as well. While the government of Odisha has, maintained that things are under control, and according to the head of the task force, Dr. Sandeep Tripathi, forest fire is almost contained. What you're looking at right now are visuals of smoke coming out of that forest fire. A lot of the activists who are working on the ground, the environmentalists who are working on the ground, tell us that it's not that simple, and there needs to be a proper assessment of the kind of damage that we're talking about and the fire. But the thing that was really worrying is this particular satellite image that we're going to pop up on the screen as well. I'll ask Ira to share that for you. That just shows you the kind of the gravity of the situation that we're talking about, because this satellite image is a heat map of the fires. There you see it across that forest. And that is the reason why we are concerned and why we believe you should know about what's going on in Orissa. Joining me this evening to give us a perspective on what things are like on the ground and what is being done. We understand also from newspaper reports that the government is now asking the local people to help as well. But is this going to be enough? Dr. Anish Nderia is the president of the Wildlife Conservation Trust. Mr. Biswadit Mohanty is the secretary of the Wildlife Society in Odisha. He joined us last week as well. We hope we have better internet connection with him. And I'm also very pleased to introduce you to Archana Soreng, who is the member of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on climate change, and she belongs to the indigenous Karya tribe from the area that we're talking about as well. I welcome all of you to this conversation, and I thank you for making time to speak with us. Archana, if I may please start with you. Could you give us an idea of what's going on the ground? And okay, we seem to have lost that connection with her. We'll try and get her back. Anish, I'm going to keep relying on you and your internet connection like we did last time as well. Are things any better today than they were last week when we last spoke?
No, the only thing that has been better is the denial. That the government has still denied that the fire is not so devastating as it was, that it is under control, but it is still raging. Obviously, I mean, a lot of areas it can't burn because it's already that those areas are devastated. So fires, once they reach this level, they either get extinguished when they hit a big water body, or they hit something which is non-inflammable. Otherwise, it will continue to burn because this time of the year is extremely dry. There is a lot of leaf litter. There are a lot of deciduous trees, and those deciduous trees shed their leaves, so that the entire forest floor is covered. So the only way you can curtail it in patches, you can't curtail long fires is by having counter fires, which means you burn the inflammable material in the same direction where the fire is moving. So it is then halted by that area because there is nothing to burn there. So you have to destroy some part of forest to save other areas. I think all this, I mean, at this level, after 10 years, 10 days of burning, I don't think it will now get extinguished because of some government effort. I don't think even 1,000 people can fight it, because these fires are almost invisible during the day. It is impossible to go. The temperatures there anyways are somewhere close to 40 degrees. And when the fire is burning, the shirts of people who go to douse these fires catch fire even when they're about 30, 40 meters away. So the only time that somebody can do something about a fire like this is in the night. But this is a very big area. There are hardly any roads inside. So you can't get any vehicle, you can't get any support. So it's almost, and I have worked very closely with the forest department for the last 20 years. It is almost, I mean, it is the most difficult thing to do for a forest guard, because you are dehydrating, you don't have anything to eat, you feel like having water, you are up on the mountain slope. So it's impossible for a human being on ground to go and do something about the fire once it reaches this proportion. The only way you can fight it is to not allow it to happen in the first place.
So are you saying effectively, Anish, this is just going to burn through the forest and there's nothing anybody can do now?
Well, they can counter fire, which means they have to predict how the fire is moving, and they'll have to burn certain areas in that fire. So that they will have to do. They can't attack the entire fire at the same time because they don't have enough personnel. So in fact, this year has been very bad in terms of funding. So a lot of forest department, not just Odisha, and I work closely with Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, a lot of their fundings have been cut. And so the fire watchers who are normally appointed in some of the better governed parks have also not been able to start their work at the stipulated time. Everybody knows that by February, the forest is dry in central India, and that is when the risk from man-made fires is very high. So they start work in December itself. But because there is no funding, I don't know the situation in Odisha. Mr. Mohanty will be able to tell me about funding there. But I can talk from across the country. This year, there was very little funding for this. But as far as Simlipal and Odisha in general goes, I think the forest department needs to really go and take some lessons from neighboring states of Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, to understand how these things are done, even with minimal amounts of money.
Right. Mr. Mohanty, we understand the state has set up a state-level task force under Dr. Sandeep Tripathi of the IFS. That seems to be like a step in the right direction. Also, newspaper reports tell us that there are 1,250 personnel stationed on the ground right now from the forest department staff and fire watchers to help. Is this enough, in your opinion? Will this help us bring this situation under control in any way?
I don't think, this will help in a big way. First of all, 1,250 personnel is nothing. You need at least 10,000 people there. The area is huge. It's almost 5,000 square kilometers area we're talking about. The adjoining areas of Similipal are contiguous areas are full of reserve forest. Good thick reserve forests are there. So the total area of the biosphere is 5,500 plus. So to handle these issues in such a huge area, at least you need 10 to 15,000 people. Plus, you need sufficient people so they can work in shift. You also do the same work in the night. It's impossible, and it's very exhausting. It's a very, very painful situation also, because as Anish was saying, the fire is, it's unapproachable. So the best way to do it, to tackle, is not to let it happen, as he was saying. And if it happens, then the best persons who can do it is the local community, because the fire is controllable within first 2 to 3 hours. After that, it simply goes out of control. That part of there is a standard operating procedure, SOP, issued by the Orissa Forest Department in 2017, which has very detailed steps, what needs to be done, how it is done, who will do that. It pinpoints responsibility, what the guard will do, what the range officer will do, what the DFO will do. That SOP seems to have been completely ignored this year. That is the most unfortunate part. If they would have just followed the SOP step by step, these things would have, the situation which you are seeing would not have been at what it is right now. And talking about the committee, the task force which has been set up, the most unfortunate part is that it is a completely so-called Sarkari committee. There is hardly any participation from people who are on the ground. Like, there, for example, could have been taken in as a member who work on forest rights issues and forest conservation in Odisha. There is no representation of any wildlife organization, NGO. There is no representative of any NGO which is engaged in forest protection also. So these are, this committee is only full of government officials, and there is a namesake NGO which only conducts workshops in Bhubaneswar. And so if you have this kind of committee, obviously you're not doing anything. So I hope the government, as it is, the fire is, the fire will not burn itself out. What's to be done? Just, I don't think these people can stop it at any time right now. They can only prevent the fire in new places. I hope they're doing that. And there is a problem of funding shortage. All the tiger reserves in the country have suffered a funding cut from the Ministry of Environment and Forest Climate Change over the last few years. And this year has been no surprise. But unfortunately, fortunately, Orissa is blessed with a huge amount of Campa money, because a lot of mining happens here. And for getting mining leases, for the diversion of forest land, the companies have to pay something known as Campa to the Campa contribution, the user agencies. And that money to Orissa has got almost 6,000 to 7,000 crores to its account, which is with the central government. And every year they get around 600 to 700 crores. So some amount of that money could have been put to use for fire control, which they have not done. And this year also, I had gone to adjacent district, Keonjhar district. In one range, Telkoi range, I was surveying just 2 days ago. So out of a forest area of around 1,200 square kilometers, they have appointed only 25 firefighters, which is, negligible, drop in the ocean. So with this kind of manpower, it is humanly impossible for any range officer or any DFO to fight fires.
Okay, and I'll come back to the question of funding with both of you, but I just want to bring in Archana Suring if we have her internet working. Archana, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Would you be able to tell us what's going on on the ground? We understand that the government is reaching out to people who live in those areas to help. Would you give us an idea of what that looks like on the ground right now?
Yeah, so first of all, the thing which I would like to raise, Faye, is that, it should have been a preparedness rather than, post-event curriculum wherein you are reaching out to people. Because I want to reiterate this, that forest fire is not for the first time which is happening in Simlipal or Odisha for that matter. It is a forest fire have been occurring. So the thing is, which is very much ideally should have been done. There is end of winter season, the planning and awareness program needs to have been reached out to the local communities, wherein the local communities and the forest department together are planning and working towards how to protect fires and how to protect forest fires for that matter. So it is very important also to understand that there has been no absolutely awareness program, as I have interacted with the Sarpanch from the Panchayat of the Nepal areas and the local communities, which they should have done in December and January. It's now only after the forest fire has occurred that they are reaching out to the people, which is very late. And also for that matter, I would like to re-emphasize that the second thing be very crucial in terms of mitigation would be that how are we involving panchayat level in this entire forest fire protection. So that has been really missing to engage people in a panchayat level.
So when you say that the government has not done enough to prevent this fire from occurring, and they're not interacting enough and warning people on the ground or educating people on the ground, could you tell us what should have ideally been done?
Yeah. First of all, in this perspective, it is also important to understand that the indigenous communities, the Adivasis and forest dwellers communities have been engaging in village level forest protection initiatives. And they are the ones who have village level institutions wherein they prevent the timber mafias and poachers and hunters to enter into the forest. And specifically in terms of forest fires, they are engaged in village level patrolling, which is often done by the women and the communities all together. So these initiatives are already there. It is important to support these initiatives from the government end. And for that matter, why not we use institutions like Manrega and the fund which has been allocated under CAMPA to support this community-led initiative. One. The two would be that why not it is also important to ensure that these awareness programs or these capacity building programs of the community is done in a organized way or in a strategic way, wherein it is a continuous effort and not an effort when it after the event has or the crisis has occurred. And for that matter, I would like to link the third perspective, which is like this is an entire perspective which is coming from denial of climate crisis, I would say. Because I say this denial of climate crisis, because it is a vicious circle. Last year, we had COVID-19 outbreak and lockdown. Then we had Amphan cyclone. And then we are having now forest fire. Till when do we want disasters to happen to acknowledge that, climate crisis is happening? And a mitigation has to be there from the state level government. And for that matter, I would really want to emphasize that it is not only forest department or for that matter, the chief minister office, it has to be the responsibility of the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, a collective effort by the different departments, because this is impacting the livelihood of the indigenous and local communities also, because they lost their livelihood in COVID, they lost their livelihood in Amphan, they're losing their livelihood in forest fire. So it is a livelihood, climate crisis, and a whole huge, large perspective of biodiversity conservation and environmental justice aspect.
And I'll circle back to this, I'll come back to you, but I just want to bring in Anish on this question of funding and the level of seriousness with which the government, state and center have treated the environment over the last 1 year. I mean, we've covered stories of environment clearances being given to infrastructure projects in various parts of the country in the thick of the lockdown, as if that was the most important thing that needed to be addressed, which is handing over the forest for large construction. When you talked about funding earlier, why is it that the forest departments have not received proper funding this year?
See, Faye, we don't treat nature as a mother, and that's the reason why we don't give it the importance it deserves. Everybody, each one of us sitting in 4 different places are surviving because of the oxygen and the water we are getting for free, virtually free, because of nature. So when we do our developmental projects, when we do the cost benefit analysis, they never ever consider the value, the intrinsic value of the forest. They consider the value of the tree cover that is there, which means the timber that's existing on it, and that is not even 1% of the total value of the ecosystem. So I don't know whether I've mentioned
didn't one second, sorry to interrupt you. Didn't the Supreme Court instruct the government to relook at that mandate this year and set aside, a committee has come back saying that, we will look at it differently, including the contribution to the environment and climate change impact of cutting down a forest?
No, that's true. But all those committees, India is extremely good at forming committees. So any problem that happens, you will have a committee, and that there will be another committee to monitor that committee. So committees are fine, but we don't see any change on the ground. And India, as I said, is a big country. So there is variation in the way the government is treating their biodiversity. First of all, that should go away. There should be a blanket thing across the country where ecosystems, no matter whether they are deserts, there are marshlands, they are wetlands, or they are grasslands or forests, they are treated at the same status. Funding wise, as Mr. Monti said, Odisha has very huge amount of CAMPA money. Now, that is not to be proud about in a way. If you ask me, as a person who is doing conservation, most of these CAMPA funds they come when you convert forest into non-forest, which means either for mining, either for road or some other developmental project. So on one end, you are liquidating forest. On the other end, the money that you gather from the project proponents as a compensation is not even plowed back into getting the forest in a better condition. So at one end, the forest is degraded because I said that the communities that live on the ground are extremely poor. They have to depend on the forest. They will be dependent on minor forest produce. These are multiple use areas which are burning, where there are people living cheek by jowl with nature. So they have no other option. So the money that you collect by destroying the forest, that is through conversion of forest into non-forest, should go directly to the communities. That is the first thing, because only when money starts flowing in, only when the people on the ground start seeing opportunities coming their way, will they start negotiating with the department. Otherwise, the forest department's responsibility is to protect the forest, but they have no funding. And the other departments, like the tribal departments, whose budgets are maybe 70, 80, 90 times more than that of the forest department, could be more, the irrigation department, and all other departments like the agriculture, they are all dependent on the forest, and their budgets are 50 times, I mean, a magnitude larger than the forest department. They should all start taking responsibility of that land, which is generating the water, the oxygen, and whatever that is for businesses, for those ministries. So I think the biggest challenge is to look at forest in that we do. I mean, the biggest issue in India is that we are treating forest in isolation from all other developmental things. I think it is the center of development. You cannot develop without respecting ecology. Economics is sitting on the bedrock of ecology. That is what it is. And so I don't think it's like an RBI bank. If we have to talk of money, we will give top priority, top protection to some of the top politicians and some of our top banks. The forest is a much, much, much more wealthy bank than any other bank that human beings have created. And if we don't put money in it, if you ask me the overall budget of environment and forest, so if there are, say, 600 plus national parks and sanctuaries in India, the overall budget that the center is allocating is not even equal to the amount of money that was spent on building a sea link in Bombay, which is just 4.6 kilometers of sea link, costed more than the budget that was allocated for environment protection, or I mean the forest protection. Can you imagine? Now, how are you going to solve? So see, fires for people like Mohanty, for people like Archana, we know there are fires everywhere, but there is a bigger fire that is needed within the heart of the government. Unless they understand that wildlife, tigers, water, and the poorest of the poor are all intrinsically linked, we are not going to find. This is not COVID. We are not going to solve it by solving symptoms. We have to target the main root cause, which is lack of governance and lack of integrated design or integrated planning in the country for forests.
I want to bring in Mr. Mohanty here. I read out a little while ago that what the government has done is set up a state level sort of task force under the chairmanship of Dr. Sandeep Tripathi to tackle this problem. We also have a quote from Dr. Sandeep Tripathi who says, and I quote, that the forest fire is now almost contained. Core area with precious wildlife has not been impacted much. The fire is mostly confined to peripheral areas of the Tiger Reserve. Do you agree with this statement, Mr. Mohanty?
See, a similar statement was made, I told you 5 days ago, by the Chief Conservator. Mr. Sandeep Tripathi is a former Principal Chief Conservator. He retired in January. And so the current serving Principal Chief Conservator, he visited the area and said, wildlife is not affected and the fire is a ground fire. And so large trees are intact. This is not a ground fire, unlike Australia and Amazon forest. So we should not be much worried about the loss which is happening here. So with this kind of attitude, I mean, wildlife for the Orissa Forest Department means tigers and elephants. They don't look at the pangolin, they don't look at the snakes, they don't look at the frogs which inhabit the forest, which are the ground dwelling fauna. So with this kind of attitude, you can well imagine how the management is going in which direction. So it is, yes, I mean, since yesterday, the task force was set up and there is a basic defect in the task force, I pointed it out. And I don't see the task force doing, being of much relevance now, because whatever they will suggest or plan, that will be applicable for the next year. My question is that, why did they not follow the existing SOP, which is a part of their official record and directions since 2017? Every year they're supposed to follow that. They have not followed it. And the government is not talking about accountability. There is no talk about fixing of accountability because of these devastating fires. Why did they not have the local meetings with the committees? Why did they not offer incentives to the village committees to stop fires? These are all part of the SOP measures. And thumb of the rule calculation says there are 12,000 VSS groups in the entire state, registered VSS groups, 12,000 Van Sangraksh groups are there in the entire state. You offer them 10,000 rupees to prevent forest fire in the area, they'll be happy to take that money and take steps. It's a matter of just 12 crores, which is nothing compared to the loss which are facing because of the forest fires. So this kind of, this is the attitude itself.
Mr. Mohanty, we have a couple of questions from our audience members. Ranu wants to know that even though this is disastrous, can some fires help regenerate forests? So my question then is, how long will that take? And also, Asta Agarwal says, how can we find more reliable information about fires? Is this man-made? Mr. Mohanty?
No, fires are man-made. There is no doubt about it. We have to accept the fact that these are all man-made fires. Fires, of course, when the fires kill the existing vegetation, the regeneration will occur, definitely, because the seeds which are underground, underground, they will come up in the next flush and all that. In fact, for Kendupatta collection, there is a system, one wing of the forest department, which is the Kendupatta wing. They go around setting fires, they cut the bushes and setting fires. The other wing, which is the forest department, main forest department, they go around beating, stopping out the fires, stopping the fires. So this is how now of course, there are a number of orders from the top that don't set fires during the Kendu season, but still then it happens at many places. There is another issue of moha collection, which is done by the Adivasi community mostly. The problem is that they light fires under the moha tree to collect the moha flowers which fall. The season has just started. But if they don't attend to the fire, sometimes they spread to the adjacent forest. So that is one advice we have been offering to the state forest department since 3 years, that why don't you motivate the local community to do this controlled burning in each and every village, so that there is no moha tree under such fire spreading out to the nearby forest. They are not doing. You see, the engagement with the local community is zero. And the park management, particularly Simlipal, it is absolutely, there's a question of breakdown of governance. The park director refuses to give his tour diaries when I asked it under RTI, because I wanted to find out how many tours he was going inside the park. The deputy director refuses to give tour diaries under RTI. So this kind of, the opacity with which the park is run, the absolute lack of transparency is now leading to such disastrous things. And there is a demand for the transfer of the deputy director now. The locals are demanding, we are also demanding, because he has completely failed with interacting with the locals and having a community-based management system for the park.
Archana, if I may ask you, what is the likely impact of this fire as assessed right now on the forest as well, but also on the indigenous local communities? Archana, you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I was unable to hear your question. Can you please say it again?
Yes, of course. Would you be able to tell us what the impact of a fire like this would be on the local communities who live around the forest?
First of all, when we are talking about forest fires in Simlipal specifically, the forest fire occurred in February, and I would like to say that the MFP season or the mahua collection season usually starts from end of March, and the flowering starts from the end of March, and then the collection starts from mid of April, and then there is Sal Sid, which happens in May. So in this particular point of view of Simlipal fires, as media reports also stated that the possible reasons could be because of indigenous and local communities. So I would like to refute that and say that at this particular point of time, because the MFP season has not started, it would be wrong. We also need to understand that the rise in temperature plays an important role. And the second thing which I would like to also say is that when we say that man-made factors are there in terms of forest fire, it is also important to understand that when we say man, it is often a tendency to blame the indigenous and local communities under the when it is said as man-made. So I would like to say that the indigenous and local communities are the ones who have been protecting the forest fires, and it is also not only it's me saying, but it is the science saying, the Center for Science and Environment, and there has been international reports on that. We have instances from from Solika tribes from Karnataka. We have instances from Australia. We have instances from Guatemala, wherein, it is not only a phenomenon in India, but also across the globe, wherein indigenous communities have been protecting and preserving the forest through their community-led initiatives. So I would like to say that when I am saying about the impact is huge, because it is in terms of both, in terms of health, and both in terms of livelihood, and it is also both in terms of a larger perspective of climate crisis, wherein we say, the indigenous communities are the ones who are contributors towards climate action, but they are the ones who are most vulnerable when it comes to climate crisis. So when I say this, I also would like to focus or emphasize that the Campa funds, which we were talking about, so I would like to explain that how, Campa funds are at the cost of the lives of the Adivasis, forest dwellers, and the local communities, because it is their land which has been taken for the developmental projects, and it is their, the atrocities and the displacement and migration which is at the cost of Campa. And and then why not this Campa funds have a equal say or the primary say of the indigenous people when the fund we are talking about, when it is on the base of the indigenous people, the Campa fund comes into place. So I would like to say that why not give Gram Sabhas the 2006, it has provisions for conservation, and it has provisions for community-led conservation practices and community forest protection management committees. So I think it would be very integral to emphasize on strengthening those committees under the Act, and specifically emphasizing on implementation of the Act.
Right. I'm going to leave this here, but like I kept saying the last time as well, we're going to keep coming back to this issue. A couple of things that you can do as citizens: raise your voice on social media, demand action from the government, state and center, not just with this year, but preventive action in every year following. Insist on reading up on what is happening with the forest departments and with the environment ministry in your state and with the central government. Speak up for the forest, speak up for the animals, speak up for the people who don't have the ability and the access that you do. I want to thank my panelists for being very kind with their time and spending time with us again this evening. Specifically, Archana Sureng, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. It's always wonderful to see women take charge and be the voice of their communities. For our audience, Archana is just 25 and is really become the global voice of the people that she belongs to. I thank you all for speaking to us. At 9 p.m., our news is going to come up, just the news for 10 minutes, where we tell you everything that's going on in the world. And at 9:30, I'll have a conversation with Asif Pamla on how various NGOs battled COVID in Dharavi and the success that they have encountered. For now, thanks for watching. Good night.
Thank you, Faye.
Thank you.